Great. Welcome all to another in-depth with OpenTEAM. OpenTEAM, as you know, is the open technology ecosystem for agricultural management and a project of Wolf's Neck Center for Agriculture and the Environment. Our dynamic and growing community consists of now over more than 40 organizations and hundreds of individuals who gather each month in various working groups and open team related meetings. And this in-depth learning series is one of the tools we use to help build the knowledge base across our community in ways that foster coherence and collaboration. And each of these series helps us to collaborate and evaluate new concepts, technologies, in order for us to each ask better questions, build better tools through sharing our work. So we work to address these common barriers rather than promote any specific solution on these calls. And in the pre-competitive space we hold, we are bringing together private and public partners to achieve better outcomes and accelerate innovation by sharing across boundaries. So today, in that spirit, I'm really pleased to introduce folks from Look Into and Pablo Ledo and his colleague Mattue and their team, who I've been really pleased to work with as they've been co-developing some of the work on the digital coffee shop face, as well as you may have seen other in-depths on food econs and that relationship to the Regen 1 work. So with that, I'm really excited to have Pablo share their work and as it relates to our shared vision here. So take it away, Pablo.
Okay, thank you. Uh, well, like Dorn said, I am originally from Mexico City. I relocated a few years ago in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and started this company. Into is the second stage of the company. Really, it was meant to be a digital story sharing and sort of the intermediation marketplace for global South producers. I worked with such producers for years. In my background, I was originally a marketeer, then had an opportunity to start a organic food label in Mexico. Um, and after that, I spent a few years working directly with producers through an NGO. And our role in the NGO was to channel funds from the government and others to start small organic or purpose-driven cooperatives and businesses, mostly agricultural and or other eco sort of different variations of collection and what typical in countries like Mexico. So I did that, and I discovered that actually people knowing where things came from, who made them, why they were important in terms of ecosystems that were affected, and all of these aspects of different products was kind of the most important thing they could know. And I saw that we did that well on one-on-one basis, but we needed a platform to do that in a massive scale if we really wanted to connect consumers and producers in a positive way, especially all producers that are doing things for the benefit of all life and that are in that regard purpose driven in a wide range of different categories, like of course organic, regenerative, but we are also talking about circular economy, alternative energies, etc. So in recent years, we changed a little bit the original scope of having a marketplace and devoted the platform to be just a storytelling platform. And it's not no commercial transactions, but just focus on the story part of our platform. And that's when we started the Into Vision. And it's been a very interesting road thus far. We have, and I'm going to show you a little bit about the platform. And but at this point, we have been running a pioneer program with different brands and producers. And in recent months, we met Dorn and we started collaborating, and are really excited to now be a part of the OpenTEAM and contribute to the ecosystem with one very specific element, which would be a consumer-facing digital story sharing platform that could be connected to all of the experiences that and different platforms that you already have, and sort of close the cycle in terms of bringing information that is evidence-based, that is based in all the data that you are collecting in different forms, and convert that into visual and emotionally bonding and deeply engaging stories for the different markets where those products are destined. Before going out with this, Mattue, I'd like to then give you the mic so that you could do your own introduction.
Okay. Well, so I've been in IT for over 40 years, which is a scary thought in itself. I started out obviously as a developer and then worked into development management. I sort of peaked in a conventional, well, let me say this. Early on, I had an interest in alternative economy and circular economy, but I became interested in conventional economy and ended up working in high finance and later in federal government projects in development management. And so now is sort of my circling back to my interests in the 80s and 90s. And I'm operating right now as Pablo's CTO, and amazingly excited about this project. And as well, the community of people that are connecting to this project. So I feel like for me, it's coming full circle.
Thank you, Mattue. Well, that being said, let me share my screen and show you a little bit of what we do and maybe a few examples. So we discovered that there's one problem. There's a lot of communications going on between the producers and the brands and their markets. But there's one problem in terms of immediacy. Many times when people are in a situation of purchasing or consuming or eating or using these products, they don't have the background. They don't understand what is behind the product, what is behind what they have in front of them. And which means there's really there's no clear idea of how people and planet are affected specifically by each one of the products that we have in front of us. So for consumers, we thought, let's bring that immediacy. Let's create something that lets you get your smartphone and in the real world, take a snapshot of something using image recognition, and then bring you the story of that particular object, or do the exact same thing in a digital world and provide a widget that could make the story go with your product, and wherever your product is shown, the story can be shown. And it's like this deeper view into the product, not really what explicitly the brand or others are saying, but more like implicit. What is this? What can I discover about the origin of this product and about its how it affects people and planet? That's about what we're doing. Then the solution for producers and for brands is, okay, giving you a very simple way of putting together and assembling a digital story that has rich media, that has a lot of different resources, and all of those resources are condensed in a simple unit of up to eight digital cards. And those digital cards can be anything from maps to images to audio, video, etc. And it's the etc. is important, and I will be explaining a little bit further how this is evolving. But the idea is to be able to assemble these stories and then publish them, have them in our cloud, and then being able to deliver those stories in many different formats to many different kind of viewers, digitally and in the physical world. So you have rich media, you have blockchain elements verifying origin of stories, you have omni-channel distribution and analytics, and we are now evolving to have more and more deep engagement tools, and we would like to do that um, in a based on the blockchain features of the platform. Um, as a part of this presentation, we'll make it available, this presentation, for everyone, so that you can maybe just take a snapshot of or point your camera to this QR code and download the into viewer, and then have some of the experiences that we will be showing. But in any case, we will share with you a few examples of digital stories that are now in our platform. I think I would be preaching to the choir in this moment if I had to explain the importance of purpose driven, but let's just assume that right now it is a priority for all of us to connect with consumers in such a way that the purpose is a shared feeling. Purpose of the brand, purpose of the producer, and purpose of the consumer meet. And I think this is a very important moment for that. After COVID, I think there's a shift in collective consciousness, and societies are open now to many more things and to engage in many more things. I think the feeling is we want to be a part of the solution. We don't want to be a part of the problem. And we have to be aware of the fact that people are restless and that people are seeking solutions. They're seeking, and climate change, social justice. There are so many things that are now in our minds constantly, and we have been affected directly, I would say personally, for by many of these situations, especially in the past year. And I think there's a lot of momentum right now. There's a lot of going on in terms of regenerative transformation, and I think this is a historic moment where people are more open to understand all of this and to be a part of it. And I would like to then bring to the table tools to facilitate that. We know that we are not the only ones, and there are incredible efforts to bring this consumer-producer encounter. I would say a lot of this is in the traceability and blockchain-based traceability, and that, which means that there are a number of companies that are now working in terms of creating valuable and verifiable data and information about products that can be shared with consumers. So we wanted to specialize in a visual storytelling. We wanted to specialize in this last mile, bringing and being able to condense and to sort of organize all this information in a way that could be easily consulted by a massive number of people. And in this effort, we are now evolving into a much more open platform that will easily connect with other platforms in terms of APIs and SDKs and other tools that facilitate interoperation and that where Into becomes your digital story sharing instrument or part of whatever project you're doing. Our efforts go in terms of connecting all the data that's being generated at the source and at the field, and bring that to the stories in such a way that pretty much any product could be the story of any product could be looked into, and then it would have in their different cards information in real time that is the result of a process that's being verified at the source with the many technologies that are represented in this group. So to this end, we are developing all the necessary elements in our back-end to back-end communication. In this moment, I'd like to share with you, let me see if this window is already there. Okay, I will share a few details about that maybe further, and how we're doing that. There's one example for Region 1, which is also a part of region of OpenTEAM, and where we are connecting to the registry or to the onboarding tool that they are developing. And we have been working with some of the members of OpenTEAM to make that possible. But what that looks like in terms of, just changing the share a little bit here, what that looks like in terms of stories that are being then shared with consumers is something that I will share in a second. These are stories that were created based on Region 1's onboarding of farmers on board information and data and images about their operation are then uploaded. We take specific data strings and images and create this individual stories. In this case, each one of these images is also showing the naming block that with the place of origin of each product, in an effort to create a place-based appreciation of regenerative experiences and farms. So what you would do is click on any one of these, and then in real time, the widget brings data and composes the story that where you can see and easily consult what's going on with the farms. You have also texts that could be added. There is social media sharing one-click button, and all of these is templatized specifically with Region 1's own structure, where we are showing some of their regenerative outcomes and using the food icons that are now being kind of the common language to share this information. There's a video resource here. So if you go back, you have several examples of stories that have been created that way, always explaining how specific families and specific farms are making progress in their regenerative efforts. The same structure, only with different information. Okay. So Mattue, in terms of how we visualize this interoperative or interoperation and kind of the evolution, could you please offer a little bit more detail about it?
Yeah, sure. So obviously you can tell that there's a lot of effort here being put into making sure that the stories are beautiful, but we also want them to be true. So we're trying to essentially get into what's classically called the oracle problem, which is getting real data from the real world backed onto the blockchain and entered into the story. And this is a ongoing discussion with each of these partners on how to do that. And you see there, in particular, like for instance with Regen Network, their whole goal is to collect enormous amounts of data about actual performance in the field. So if we can figure out ways to feed that into the story, all the players have the confidence that they're not just reading something that sounds appealing, but that it's about what's really going on, and it's constantly changing and being updated and is verifiable in all that wonderful transmutable, transparent and immutable ways that the blockchain technology provides. This is a small tip on a very large iceberg for us, because you know, as we get deeper into this, what some people call Web3 aspect of this, we're going to be pushing it a lot farther, and we'll be getting blockchain, both blockchain recording of information, like through the oracles, but also tokenization or incentivization in between users and producers in terms of performing within the system. And then ultimately, we also hope that every story itself will have a digital identity, which can then become the locus of further activities, including funding and you know, opportunities that stem from the new and oncoming tsunami of tokenomics and non-fungible tokens and all the wonders that can happen there, as long as the story is true and it's certifiable and unique to that provider. It can become a kind of gateway to support from data, support from users, support even from funds, from different funding sources, micro investment, all that. So we're going slow and careful, but the goal is to be a fully enabled blockchain and artificial intelligence enhanced platform that can support the real story and the people who are creating the activity behind the story to accomplish their ends. Could say a lot more about that, but I think that's a good sort of future look.
Thanks, Mattue. And then, well, the features that we can offer right now in terms of people who are viewing stories are kind of what I already demoed, looking at those stories, sharing them, and kind of placing a like or a love sign where producers that you like and you would like to follow. We have hyperlinks that link every story to in-depth information via any URL, and then people are directed to wherever the storyteller would like them to land after viewing the basic digital story. Right now, we use blockchain to verify sources. So there is a tool that allows you to invite sources in the field. And what they do is the feature is called Story Source, and it has a link that downloads an app that sort of turns their smartphones into a media capturing device for your story. Using this, a few storytellers that are pioneering this have invited farmers in the field from probably a tractor or in other activities that will be very, very hard to, and especially when farmers are remote. Some of the companies that have amazing sourcing communities that go all the way from places like Mozambique or West Africa or South America, and then have the opportunity to first voice storytelling, like images and voices that come directly from producers. That is already a feature that's within the platform. And we are working now in other and in expanding the ways in which people could interact, react, and contribute, and localize. So get stories that are different from each other depending on where you get them. So the same trigger image will give place to a different story depending on your location. Um, Also, a lot of personalization using machine learning and AI to really understand people's viewing patterns, and kind of based on their interests and principles, then be able to offer stories related to your own interests, and many other engagement tools that Michael, Mattue just described. And this is kind of what's in our roadmap for the second half of this year.
If I may interject just real quick, we're sort of in the beginnings of trying to define regenerative or non-extractive AI. So when we say artificial intelligence, we're not just plugging in a module from some centralized service that may or may not be consistent with the values of the stories that are being told. So we're trying to define how human labor interacts with the AI system, how bias can be eliminated, how we can interact with data commons without sharing personal information, and with assigning sovereignty to the ID of our users, and all those, half a dozen or so kind of issues currently with AI that are sort of beginning to be very much on people's awareness. For all the great benefits, there are also some real issues that need to be dealt with in the future. And so there's that, and there's the same thing with blockchains, and obviously the very recent concern with environmental aspects of blockchain calculation, but there are also other issues in terms of the oracles and the truth of data and the spoofing of data. And so the regenerative aspect is also sort of extended into a kind of regenerative computation, if that's an okay term to use at this point. And again, this is constantly on our minds, and also just very, very on the cutting edge of what we're trying to understand about the problem set, but we'll be expanding as we can into those areas.
I think that's totally right, and that's a very, very important clarification. Also, I was looking at this image in this particular slide, and it's our aspiration that this image in little time from now, as a result of an interaction with any of the tools represented in OpenTEAM, this image might include some sort of metric that would tell us, for example, in this particular farm, carbon content in that soil, in that particular farm. And that measurement would be changing because it would be dynamically connected to the source. And then being able to offer to consumers verified information that is originated at the source is kind of the most powerful thing that we can do in terms of people committing an engagement and engaging with all regenerative projects, and making it a more local experience and a more personal link for everyone. Finally, we have this experience of 100 Stories to Heal the Planet. That is a website where we have been collecting a number of the stories created by pioneer brands and producers. There's a significant number of regenerative stories, and there are many others that have to do with oceans and circular economy, but it's mostly about food and agriculture with a big component. And you are welcome to visit that. I think in terms of mining the time right now, instead of showing you more, we'd like to hear from you and maybe answer some questions or comments.
Hey, Pablo, I noticed that somebody wanted to access the deck. Do we have somewhere common that we're posting it, or this version of it that you've cooked up in the last?
I'm definitely uploading it and sharing that as in the next few minutes. Yes.
Okay.
Great. Thanks so much, Pablo and Mattue. That's great. Do we have some hot questions now, or can I prompt folks? I guess we have a standard question that we're always asking at OpenTEAM that maybe we could start with while folks are formulating their own. As you're sort of approaching this in the next phase, what are some of the biggest challenges that you think you're working on that you think you may be able to solve internally? And then what are some of the challenges that are really going to require collaboration? Those things that we need to solve together. So those are things that are obviously both of which are present and important for the community to sort of think about to make some of this vision a reality.
I think there are technical challenges. I think there are, I would say, three things about your question. One is, of course, resources. We will be we will be fundraising for some time, so there's this connection with sources for working capital, developing all this. Another one very important is we'd like to collaborate. I mean, we'd like to connect with your different projects and your different approaches to regenerative, and to be able to create the consumer facing or public facing digital story version of what you're doing. So interconnecting with your own, it would be great. One example is all the verifiable data that's being generated, but there are many aspects of the social aspects, cultural, that also intervene, are great material for story sharing. I guess right now there's a whole world of opportunity in terms of what consumers know about products, and this tool, this last mile that connects with potentially a massive number of people, is opening the door for opportunities like, for example, working with food services companies, offering a college student the possibility of learning about their food, the food they're having that very day at lunch, and learning a little bit about where it was sourced and what happened when it was sourced in that particular way. So what is the regenerative impact of that? And now that such nimble and clear and verifiable data is being generated, connecting that with the consumer story has an enormous power that I think it's untapped at this point. So we'd love to have this, opportunities to experiment with all the projects that you all have and create this. And thirdly, I think Mattue has, we need this technical collaboration.
Yeah.
So I guess our side and service stack, all the different tech arms, all the verification systems, all the different remote sensors, satellite images, we need to connect all that. And so also technical collaboration with all the groups that are taking care of different aspects will be key. I think those three things are our main challenges and needs right now.
Thanks so much. I think Alden has a question, and I'd love to come back more to some of the data entry sort of from the farmer perspective here. But Alden, take it away.
I've already bothered Pablo with this, but I'd like to pitch out a challenge to all of us. And everybody here who knows me knows I focus on carbon, but the carbon story repeats when we talk about other ecosystem services in different ways. But we as a group, I think, are trying to establish a new way of looking at what is what not only, but including what is happening in carbon markets. And one of the problems with existing carbon markets is credits denominated 1 ton CO2 equivalent are not equal, even across different allowed quantification options within a single protocol, let alone across registries. And I don't think we want to be a group that is saying, oh, this option in this protocol is the right way to define 1 ton. And I'm hoping we can stand up and sort of say, is there a metric we can jointly develop and introduce that enables people to step back and maybe determine the exchange rate to apply to develop a sense of equivalency between credits that are in circulation. And what I'm trying to say is that I think it would be unwise for us to be picking a protocol or a method. Is there a way we can set a introduce that is 100 years or something like that, that shows the exchange rate across credits that are already in circulation, so that people can see what they are and how they compare without it being a question of what's good and acceptable and what's unacceptable. And 10 years is one way. There's so many smart people in this group. Other people will come up with better ways, but if we can, introduce that overall standard, I think we could really, really, really do a lot of good. That makes sense, or is that way too confusing the way I said it?
No,
Well,
that's
I mean,
good.
Go ahead. Go for it, Mattue.
Well, we talked about this 2 days ago, so I got excited.
Yeah.
So, on the one hand, we really believe in this firsthand author just saying what they're saying. So yeah. we want to get that out. And then we want to, through this sort of wildcard, we call it wildcards, where we want to link off into other assets. If somebody can develop an asset like a market comparison sheet or whatever, and that would really help in when certain things are being presented, then we'd like to take that content and link out to it. And there's all sorts of things to be discussed, like how much story leak do we want, and will consumers become confused? But we can do all of that research and still make sure that people understand that, for instance, the complexity of the carbon credit market, which I think a lot of people are starting to think about. And, whenever I say carbon credits now, people automatically raise the issue of spoofing and confusion. And so there's obviously a need to communicate about that. So my preference is always to have the farmer or the person who's been getting the focus have a really strong voice. But also, as I said, the stories need to be beautiful and true. So we get this amazing story from this person, and then we say, and if you'd like to understand what's really going on here with carbon sequestration, please go over here. We have a wonderful chart for you that lets you understand the market better. And it's just a balance, really.
Cool. I like that. And I just want to say to everybody, if the group decides they don't want to take on the challenge I just suggested, that's okay with me. I'm still in, but I'm just saying that if any group had an ability to take on and come up with a resolution to this challenge, it's this group. So I would love us to think about it and maybe decide whether or not to embrace it. And I'll just give you a key example. Right now, because of decisions that I think are good decisions that regulators have made in the design of low carbon fuel standard markets, we live in a world where soon in California, a farmer has to meet additionality and permanence and other tests to be recognized as having sequestered an incremental ton of carbon in soils if they produce food. If the same farmer is producing feedstock that is converted to biofuel. They will soon be essentially getting a credit for increasing their carbon stocks with no permanence or additionality tests. So quite unintentionally, we were about to step into a future where there's a lot more money in growing crops to make biofuels than growing the same crops to deliver food. And I think that conflict between the two different ways of estimating things is completely unintentional, but it's really material.
Well, I would love to come back to that maybe. I've got another question here, but I think this comes to sort of visualization and context. And I know you've been working on the coffee shop to sort of relate sort of individual producers to sort of a larger sort of subset, and how that might be expressed both to producers but to the general public. And I think that also speaks to some of the challenge of a platform to make some of those sort of context specific visualizations a little bit more possible. So if you're showing this specific practice on a specific farm in relationship to the even within that farm, are you doing agroforestry on 2% of your land, or is it the way you do everything, or how does that relate to the larger landscape? And I think that gets a bit to this additionality conversation and how we can do that in a storytelling, data-driven storytelling way. But I see Kevin has a question, so I want to hand it over to him.
Hey, thanks, Dorn. And thanks for the presentation. This was really interesting. My questions are more on the technical side. I'm looking at your 100 stories, and these are really quite interesting. I'm curious, for your blockchain, who are the nodes, and like what is the consensus approach? You know, as you mentioned, Matt, the Oracle problem is kind of always present.
Yes, well, we're in flux. You know, we're in deep conversation with Regen Network. So if that continues the way it is, their approach to oracles, and I forget, they have a funny term for it, but it's where you have sort of 6 vectors of truth, and you kind of have a meta algorithm for blending them together into some result, and you know, you continue to tweak those knobs until results seem like they're headed toward the truth, if not true. But it really depends. I know there are other blockchains that might apply to certain aspects of this. I mentioned that we want to issue an NFT on the story itself so that the story becomes a digital locus. It's not immediately clear to me that we can do that on Regen Network as it stands. They claim to have an NFT platform, but we're going to take a very close look at that. And if we need to partner with Cardano or somebody else, then of course we would do that. One thing that I will say is, if it becomes a locus of fundraising, we have to deal with the fact that a lot of these farmer producers are unbanked, and that's where a partner like Cardano could really swing up and do something different. But you know, we just got to make it work. I'm personally not opposed to having 8 blockchains if you need 8, 3 if you need 3. You know what I mean? I don't one stop shopping. I'm not seeing that right now in the space.
I'd like to add before that a simple thing about the API efforts that we're doing right now. I wanted to share, and now I found the file, and let me just, if you look at the 100 stories, and you look at Region 1 farmer stories concretely, this is the plan that we'd like to have with many other of the members. So this is pretty much a diagram, an interaction diagram with service stack and the templatized stories. So what we did is actually plan on every item within the story to be responding to specific JSON data strings. And then at the right side, you have like what the outcome looks like when those data points are being turned or as elements within the story. And if we could do this with other of your tools and databases, and then offer the opportunity to have this outcome, what you see on the right side, and same thing that you can see in the kind of the examples with Regen 1. That's our kind of initial experiment, and we think that we would with OpenTEAM we would really like to multiply these experiences and bring potentially hundreds or thousands of regenerative stories to the public that will be very interested in knowing about them.
I just wanted to follow up. I had a thought because I realized I didn't answer the whole question. I don't know if you've looked into Regen Network's relationship with Cosmos, but that's very much a proof of stake based system. It's all based on the Cosmos open source stack.
Kevin, does that get at your question?
Yeah, thanks. I'll look more into that.
Okay. Yeah, look up Cosmos. It's really interesting, and the IBC, the inter blockchain, connectors that they're developing are also extremely appealing, especially if we have other chains that we're going to be sending information to and from.
I wanted to pick up on the slides that Pablo just shared in terms of the data entry process, and maybe if you might just walk through a little bit more. So we have in OpenTEAM sort of the idea that we want to be able to enter data once, use it many times. And certainly there are some places where you can pull perhaps from the ecosystem. But I understand, from some previous conversations, you've also been working on sort of the farmer experience of sort of digital. You talked a little bit about image capture and sort of entering sort of the narrative piece that may be layered on top. And I wonder if you might just sort of talk a little bit about your vision and what you've already built in terms of the producer experience and how that process goes, both, it's partly on the tech side, but also sort of the social approach to gathering and creating those stories.
There is a feature we call StorySource, and StorySource lets any story creator at any point of the creation of the story to invite a remote source to be a part of that story. That invitation is really an email sent to that particular person, and then by clicking on a link, they will download a specific app for Android and iOS called StorySource. That's exactly the name. And then once they sign up for that, there's that is where we're using blockchain to verify actually that the device is being used for creation or for the media that is then shared to your story. It is a very simple app that was devised or was designed to so that any farmer at any point of their work with a minimum effort, they would just take images or snapshots or 30-second video clips, and they would just point, click, and send. And the process is wired to a specific story, so you can include first voice.
If I can give some context to this, so we have a content management framework built on Ruby that is pretty solid. It has, obviously we always want to improve it, but so this story source material will be coming into the content management workflow of a story editor or a story author. So the author invites the source, and the source and the author collaborate together, and that material then gets integrated. So right now, stories are primarily created by people going into this content management interface and building stories using the tools that are there. Now we're transitioning to a mixture where stories are created in more automated fashion. So one strategy is the one that we're talking about with you guys, and also with a lot of other people, is developing some kind of API pipeline where there's a survey process or something that's generating information continually, and somehow that through the magic of technology creates stories inside of our framework, which you can then go and use more editor-oriented tools around once you have those raw materials. Or if you're satisfied with the automated story, you can rest there. We're also talking about ways of hooking into larger data sources, including web crawls, and creating large bodies of automated stories, which are intended to be upgraded by personal attention at a later date, but that generate a density in the marketplace where you know, most of what's out there has a story of some kind, even if it's not at this moment as good as the producer or contributor would like it to be. And then we can connect with the contributor and say, you know, surely you'd like to make this more personal, more appropriate, more awesome. And then we invite them into our content management framework.
Go ahead. Oh, go Steve.
Yeah, so I'm struck by the fact that stories are often layered. You know, if I go to a restaurant, or you gave the example of food service, and I love this concept of stories that are both beautiful and true, or perhaps the words you use, but if I'm at a restaurant, then the restaurant has a recipe, and that recipe consists of products and ingredients, and each of those products and ingredients has a story. And if it's a product, that product is in turn made up of ingredients that have a story, and the story of the ingredient may include the story of the inputs, right? Where I got my seeds and where I got. So in your content management system and in your story structure, do you have kind of support for this layering thought?
Not currently, but we definitely will, like have these stories that can branch into details and more. We are, and when you embrace the complexity of, then you'll have a challenge. What we have done with that is we recommend from the strategic, from communication strategy point of view, we have been recommending all of Into users to be more constructivist in terms of how you approach things. Human brain is really, we try to say everything in one. This is not a website. This is just a micro story. So it's better if you break down your concepts into tiny bite sizes that are all together composed whole, that will be then constructed by the person or by the human individual. And I think that's the way our brain works. And this breaking down concepts and becoming thousands of like little holographic stories that mean something, that is a much better way to express things. People who learn this way discover, and then you have the elements and you make your own personal interpretation. There's a creative process there, and there is some sort of appropriation or apprehension of what you learn that much more meaningful than, let's say, the typical commercial ad, which will be just unilateral sort of bombarding you with concepts that I'd like you to explicitly know about my brand.
This is a real middle path, though, because while this isn't a website, it could be thought of as a web layer. So as we think about what we're calling the wildcard proposal, we're thinking about, for instance, hypertext. I mean, hypertext is exactly what you're talking about. Hypertext is your opportunity to wander across the surface of all this information that people are sharing and build your own tree, if you will. So we want to explore that, but we have to go slowly. One, we have to understand the analytics and the metrics of how people are consuming stories. And we have to look at issues like leak and focus. But also, there are distinct technical challenges which are very important. Once you start hosting web code, if you will, in these story cards, our sort of the pressure on our team to vet that code that's coming into our system goes up by factors of magnitude. So we're trying to manage the technical complexity of, ultimately we'd like to gamify the interfaces and have all sorts of forms of interaction and branching, but those are all things that we have a fairly conservative view of right now. Right now we have this linear 8-card story, and we can deal with that, and we know that it looks good in every browser and under every situation. So I think that this is a big topic and something that we'll be thinking about for years.
Well, I want to thank you both so much. We're right at the top of the hour here, and I feel like we're just getting rolling on this topic.
Yeah, me too. I was like, okay, what's next? Oh, okay.
So, but I really want to thank you, and I want you all to just join me in thanking Mattue and Pablo for really sort of beginning of, I think, a much larger conversation as we head into a lot more work on the sort of the social platform across the across the network, and how we again share these beautiful and true stories that are also part of driving a new marketplace. So I'm really excited to continue that conversation. And I hope you'll join us at the next in-depth that will be with Propagate Ventures, looking at bringing some of these tools around agroforestry in particular. That'll be in 2 weeks. Any last words, Mattue, Pablo?
No, we really appreciate this moment and being in, initiating this interaction contact with this community. We're very happy to be here, and we look forward to working with all of your projects soon. And thanks for having us.
Yeah, amen. Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.